I had a fun conversation with our host this morning about technology. We were kind of, I don't know, how many of you are fans of autocorrect? So we had a blast this morning. I got a text from a friend of mine that shared his wife sent him a picture and asked the question, do I look fat in this picture? So he immediately replied, no! Exclamation mark, exclamation mark. Anyway, it auto-corrected to moo! So his next text was, somebody save me. But I wanted to share with you guys some of the things that we have seen globally as far as missions are concerned. So if I have any statistic geeks like me out here that likes graphics and statistics, you're going to love the next 5 minutes. But so the following statistics is pretty much with a disclaimer, if nothing else happens, or if God doesn't show up and do miracles, then this is the current trend where things are going. So you can go ahead and put slide number 1. I think one of the first things that really strike out for us is the mass amount of people moving from urban to the cities. So this is a trend that is on the very top there, that is really exploding. But what is very interesting as far as that concerned, or the urban migration, can you go to slide 2 just for a second? So this kind of gives you a quick overview of kind of what happens with urban and rural, how everybody's moving towards urban. Maybe I shouldn't have had 5 cups of coffee. So back to slide 1, what is very interesting for me here is from the year 2000 until now, there's been a 10% increase of people moving to the urban. And for the next 25 years, there will be about 12% increase. But what is very interesting is there's going to be a almost close to 200% increase in slums in major cities. 200% increase in slums in major cities, which is astronomical if you think of cities like Kolkata, Uganda, so it's just like, oh my gosh, 200%. So, I love listening. I think it was the lady last night that spoke about Ruth's house of Sarah's house. Is she here? Oh, there you are. I was thinking about you last night, and I was thinking, you know what? You are going to be busy in the next 25 years. Because, again, unless something changes, unless God really shows up, or we get something going to help these things, the slums and the poor in our cities are increased by 200%. All right, so another thing on this slide that you will see, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the terms of global north and global south. Global north is a term that talks about developing countries like America, Canada, Europe, mostly, that have for years been the missionary force of the world. They're the ones raised the most money, sent out the most missionary to the rest of the world, and most of those went to the global south. Global south is traditionally considered kind of the third world countries. That means most of South America, most of Africa, and most of Asia. So what is interesting in some of these trends that's going on is that in the next 25 years, we will see a decrease in Christianity in the global north of 45 million. That's, again, if nothing changes. But get this. There's an increase of almost 1 billion in the global south. 1 billion people coming to know Christ in the global south. That is just astronomical statistic that gets me really excited, because what goes on with this is the exact same thing. You can go to slide 3. You can see the shift of Christianity as it's growing in the world. But with that is missionaries. Missionaries have, about 10 years ago, global south have passed the global north as far as missionaries sent. There are more missionaries now sent. And this is kind of a good thing when we talk about how we have done missions in the past, because it means that some of our missionaries of old have actually done things right. They have raised local people. They have trained local people to reach local people. And we are starting to reap that fruits from that. Yeah, there's always a bad apple in the bunch, but for the most part, we've done things right, which is really exciting because right now we're seeing that movement starting to really pick up in the global South. One of the things that we're kind of talking about right now is a term about people from everywhere is going everywhere, which is really exciting. Traditionally, we always thought about the 1040 window. The 1040 window is 10 degrees north of the equator to 40 degrees north of the equator, where you have 1/3 of the world's land mass, but 2/3 of the world's population. Most of them unbelievers, unreached, very poor. And that's always been our target. And what we're seeing now is a lot of these things are shifting. You can go to the next slide as well. We're seeing a shift of the move of missionaries going to these places. And most of them are indigenous missionaries reaching the people in their own communities. And I'm telling you, I don't care how good of your linguistic you are or how good you know cultures, you can't beat a local reaching a local. That is just phenomenal to see that happen. So kudos to all of you guys that have discipled and have trained people in nations, that you've done it right. We're starting to reap those benefits from what we have done in the past. So I lost my place. Story of my life. So one of the things that we've always also see is we see an incredible church planting movements across the world and discipleship planting movements. That is something that has really taken off also over the last 10 years. A good friend of mine that also went hiking with me in Nepal, he said, and that was about 2 years ago, I talked to him about his church planting movement that he planted in Africa, Central Africa. And he said, 2 years ago, we just had to stop counting at 3,000. I'm like, oh, okay. I have other friends of ours in Uganda that says the same, that they have now surpassed 5,000. And they're like, we just can't keep up with what God's doing in church planting movements. They're now going into Sudan, into Somalia, into, nations that us Nepalis called Badeshis, white-skinned people, can go. And they're just flooding those areas. And it's just not planting one church, as they're planting church after church after church after church. It is just absolutely incredible. I mean, for those of you working in South America, there's church planting movements there in the tens of thousands. I know there's one in Indonesia that is just astronomical in power, and it's unstoppable. It is unstoppable. Talk about good news. These things are unstoppable because they're not in big buildings. Not that there's wrong with big buildings at all. It's just some places where persecution is heavy. The little home church, little tea shop church, the little church under the tree, exploding everywhere. And it is so exciting to see what God is doing. Some other trends that we see, slide 5. We see a lot of more women in leadership. I think this is very exciting. We see a lot of native or native, that's maybe the wrong word. I'm sorry if I offend people. English is not my first language. So if you have a problem with what I'm saying, you can text Pastor Jonathan. But local leaders, a lot of local leadership is really being raised up. The time for major mission organizations run by old white men is gone. And it's very exciting. I love it. It's just God is raising up these, and I'm talking about gifted, powerful, anointed people that God is raising up. Like the GACX new leader is a very gifted Ethiopian. This guy is just phenomenal. And I'm like, you just kind of hang on what these guys are saying. It is so exciting to be a part of it and to see what God is doing around the world. Technology. We see an incredible rate in technology. One of the things in Africa that we have a problem with is data. Cell phone data is very expensive. And we're seeing very innovative ways that God is raising some people up to get around that issue of data with cell phones. It's very exciting to see what God is doing in those. We have another person, I won't say where, that is reaching out to an extremely remote area with the unreached people group where there's no church, no known believers, no nothing. And he's doing it through WhatsApp. He's evangelizing through WhatsApp. And I'm like, oh, all right. People are just becoming inventive in the way they are reaching the nations and reaching people with the gospel of Jesus Christ. Another thing we're seeing is radical multi-agency collaboration that we have not seen ever. There was just recently a Bible translation seminar. I think it was on the East Coast. We had all the big guns there. You had Wycliffe Bible translators, or Wycliffe, however you say it, down to the very local tea shop guys that's translating a Bible. And they all come together and say, okay, we have so many Bibles that we need to translate, so many languages. How can we do it? How can I support you? How can you support me? How can we get this done to where it's not just me building my own little silo or being selfish with my own vision and purpose that I'm trying to build? I'm sorry if I'm stepping on toes here. But people are starting to brush that aside. It's like, you know what? I don't care who you are or what you're doing or what your organization is from. That's our goal. How can we make it happen? That is very exciting. That has not happened for a long time, to see agencies starting to say, you know what, you want my best guy? I'll give him to you. Because he'll fit your organization better. We haven't seen that forever. And this is really exciting to see that kind of trend in missions right now. Church planting, discipleship movements, talked about that. That's awesome. And then there's a trend so I really want to take it from really broad and bring it back to a little more narrow focus, kind of more of what we're really at the moment busy doing within Sexuality Unmasked. And that we've started to see a trend of a higher and higher attrition rate in discipleship and in the church. Meaning, like, we have discipleship schools that we plant and stuff, but we are starting to see a trend in attrition, like people falling away from the faith after going to these discipleship programs. And I don't know, maybe, if you think I'm kooky, you can come and talk to me afterwards. This is just my observation over the last 25 years of what's happening at the moment. And I believe that a lot of the problem that we have is discipleship. I think we have turned our discipleship program into goosebump discipleship programs, where we just don't want to rock the boat. I don't want to offend you. I don't want to make you feel bad. I don't want to confront your stupid ideas. I don't want to, I don't want to confront your sin or your heart. I just want to make sure you feel good. You're nice and warm and fuzzy and feeling and I think the world is screaming against that, and people are falling away faster than ever before from our discipleship programs. We just don't want the pressure for people to do stuff. So nothing more has revealed itself in this area than in the area of sexuality. I can read you statistics till the sun comes up. I think most of you know this. I'll just read you a few here. Recent statistics show that 50% of senior pastors watch pornography regularly. Not once in a while, regularly. This is church as a whole. We have worship leaders sleeping together because we're going to get married. We have missionaries having sex on the mission field. We have raging pornography addiction in the church and families. One statistic which is absolutely appalling that have not changed for almost 40 years is 1 in 4 girls or women are still being raped and molested. 1 in 4. So we can go to this room and go 1, 2, 3, 4. You have 1, 2, 3, 4. You have 1, 2, 3, 4. Statistically speaking. We all know biological men allowed to go into female locker rooms. 13-year-old double mastectomies are now allowed to be performed without parental consent. And last year, on October 15th, 2020, on a nationalized television event, our current president endorsed sex change for 8-year-olds. That is where we are in our society today. So what have changed? I think the voice of the church have changed. And what I mean by that is I believe that because of the society that we live in, because of the struggles that we fight, because of our environment that we are in, that shame has caused the church to lose its voice when it comes to sexuality. We have so much shame involved in our own struggles, or in the struggles with my family, or somebody in our church, or somebody in our group, that we feel like we can't talk about this issue, that we feel we are disqualified to talk about this issue because of shame. I mean, we all know this. It's like, you want to come and start being a worship leader, or you want to go out to outreach, you're going to share the gospel, and all of a sudden the devil comes out with his shame card, and he goes, I know what you did. I know what you did. I know what you looked at. I know how you looked at that girl yesterday. How do you dare do this? He's a master of this. And I think in many ways that have really slowed down or brought down our testimony when it comes to this with sexuality in our churches, in our ministry. We know 4 out of 10 women who have an abortion is churchgoers. That comes from the church. We know that in 2015, there's a study that's just 6 years ago now, that says by age 19, 75% of all young people under the age of 19 have had sex. 75%. I mean, like I said, I can go on and on and on. What exploded last year, the Me Too movement, or a couple of years ago, more and more women started to come out about the intense sexual pressure that they are on, whether at work or on dates or whatever, and it really opened a lot of eyes in the world about this issue, and people starting to look into it more closely. So I want to make sure that I don't want to paint a bleak picture. I just want to sound the alarm, because this is what we are seeing right now. This is the current trends in our lives and in our ministry and what we do. I want to sound the alarm. You see, we talk about that there's a secret list in church. Now, in this, the secret list is a list of topics we never talk about in church. You know, it's not published, it's locked in the basement crawl space. It's a list. It's pornography, it's molestation, it's rape, masturbation, dating flaws, whatever it is. It's a list that we talk about, that we just don't talk about. But then there's another list that goes with it. And that's a list of things we never get healed from or restored from. It's the same list. It's the exact same list. We always talk about, like that a nation is only as strong as the families in that nation. And the families of that nation is only as strong as the marriages in that nation. And the marriages are only as strong as that young man and that young woman that God has put together for His purposes. So no wonder that the enemy's target is not shutting down Wi-Fi or Facebook or Instagram or more potholes in the road or whatever causes most men to lose their salvation for a split second. But it is targeting that young man and that young woman. You target their identity. You target who God made them to be. You target how they react to one another. Because if you can destroy their lives at that point, it trickles up again. You destroy marriages, you destroy families, you destroy a nation, becomes weak. And it just unravels. So, we have an unchecked demonic force that is really crippling our testimony in the church. And shame has got a massive part to do with that. You see, there's two sides of a coin of shame. There's shame of things that I have done, and then there's shames of things that's done to me. Both of them have to be dealt with and cut off and restored and to have people set free. So, enough of bad news. What changes do I see coming? What changes do we see coming? I really believe in the conferences that we have done, in the youth groups that we have done, that we are seeing a massive amount of destruction in our culture. Okay, I don't think I need to tell you that. Sexuality in our culture has left in the wake a destruction like we have never seen before. But I see that valley of dry bones coming together. God restoring and healing and raising people up. In a recent conference that we've had, at the end of our seminar, we gave an opportunity for people to come forward and to confess and to bring things to the Lord. And I'm telling you, those young people ran to the altar. And it's not this typical youth group altar call. I don't know if you've seen those, where everybody do come up, but they kind of stand up there and they're like, what am I supposed to do? It's not like that. It's they coming forward and they are wailing. They are crying, they're pouring out, they're doing business with God right there. Nobody's laying a hand on them, but they are just crying out to God and pouring out the Spirit. You see, all we need to do in the church is to set the table. We just need to set the table and say, you know what? You're hurting, you're broken. I understand that. Proverbs talks about a righteous man falls 7 times, but he gets up. So you stumbled, get up. Let's run to the altar. Let's deal with these things in our culture. And I'm telling you, if you set the table, they will come. If you set the table of forgiveness and freedom from shame and guilt, no matter where you go, they will come forward. I see shame broken off a generation of releasing of their testimony. I see people that rise up and say, you know what? I was raped. Let me tell you what God had done for me. Or I was used and abused or taken advantage of. Let me tell you about God's healing and restoration. Or maybe I was a predator. I was weak, I was vulnerable. I preyed on the weak or the vulnerable or the lonely. But God broke my heart and changed me from a predator to a protector. I see a generation of people realizing that purity is more than just the history of their body. I see a generation walking up to the very edge of hell and shout and say, you know what, I know the way out of hell. Let me tell you about His love. Let me tell you about His forgiveness. Let me tell you about the restoration that He's done in my life and that He can do it for you too. That's what we need to see, and that's what we are seeing. It's just a phenomenal thing to behold. It'll take courage, boldness, and perseverance in this cancel culture. I can't tell you that our Facebook page and Instagram page is non-existing. No matter what we post, we get flagged. It's like I think we're leaning more towards dropping sexuality and just talking about unmasked. We're just unmasking the things in our culture of what God is doing. And by the way, I have to say, we had a conference in Louisiana just a couple months ago, and in Tri-Cities. And we had an altar call, and we had an 80-year-old lady come forward and broke down and cried over something that happened 50 years ago that nobody has ever helped her walk through and deal with. So this is not just something that is for young people, even though everything that we see, the movies and technology, targets young people. It's not just for young people. Our marriages are broken for a reason. There's a 50% divorce rate in the church for a reason. It's not just the young people that are struggling with this issue. So, I want to encourage you to set the table. There is no country, no culture, no tribe that I know of that does not struggle with sexuality. If you know of one, come tell me. I'd love to know about it. I'd love to know how they deal with purity in their culture. So this is from England to Indonesia, Brazil, Italy, South Africa, US. They're all struggling. They're all fighting sexuality in their culture. So I keep encouraging people, you want to know how you can get inroads into a culture, you start talking about this. Immediately you'll have an audience. They might not like to talk about it because some cultures are extremely private. But they will listen because they are struggling with it. And so that's that's kind of some of the things that we have seen that we are doing in our culture, going to missions organizations and churches and youth groups and discipleship programs. And we talk and train people on how to train their leaders and their people to deal with the area of sexuality, and how to train their people to be more effective in helping people. I think I mentioned at the Palmer campus, we actually did I close off with this, I snuck in a survey in our intake forms for our discipleship programs. And I asked the question, sexual questions. I wanted to know how people are doing and how they're dealing with certain areas of sexuality in their lives. 7 out of 10 missionaries have had negative sexual experiences. And of those 7 out of 10, 50% has never, ever dealt with it. So you want to talk about shame, you want to talk about something that prevents you from going. You know what shame does in Christian culture and missionary context like we are? It creates a slave mentality of our missionaries. Because all of a sudden now I got to work for God's approval. God knows my past, but I mean, we all know we don't, salvation's not by works, right? But it doesn't manifest that in the way we do things. Because now I got to try harder. I got to push harder. If I do this more, then maybe God will help to release me. Maybe God will set me free from this. I just got to do more. It's like this demonic treadmill that people don't really talk about. And it's because of undealt shame. And this is in our mission organization. 7 out of 10. And that's something that we have to come in and say, you know what, we got to deal with this. Because people that are restored and healed, their testimony that are being released, it's not this PG things, Oh, I was bad and now I'm good, It's the R-rated version of their testimony that they come out and say, I was used, I was abused, I was broken, I was shattered, I was discarded in the alley like a piece of trash. But this is what God did. And this is what He can do for you. And that transformed people's lives. That's what they need to hear. Especially in our day and age and the culture and the myriad of genders. I can't even keep up with how many genders we have now. Anyway, thank you, Paul.